So my name is Juan Vasquez. I am here today to speak a little bit more about the human side of the work that we do as data practitioners. The technology, the best practices, the standards, all extremely, extremely important. But when we talk about large bureaucracies or organizations like the city of Los Angeles being the second largest in the country, I'll give you all a little perspective on what that really looks like. How humans interact with our insights, with our systems, with our work, it becomes increasingly important for it to be sustainable and permanent, or at least for it to last as long as we intend for it to last. I don't know about y'all, but there's nothing more frustrating than dedicating a lot of love and attention and effort to a project and then passing it off to the other group and then it just falling apart because they didn't have the right context or encouragement to keep that going. So that's what we'll talk about today. Specifically around how my team has built the real estate portfolio for the city of Los Angeles. Also, I'm pretty active on Twitter and Instagram. My Twitter handle is up there at JuanSBas. Feel free to tweet along. I will show some love afterwards and retweet anything. So at JuanSBas. So the city of Los Angeles, the second largest in the country. It has over 4 million residents when we talk about the metro area, 470 square miles, manufacturing, biotech, entertainment, medtech, all very important things that are ultimately affected by real estate. Affordable housing, homelessness, possible acts of terror, earthquakes, emergencies, all of these things really, really matter and are impacted by real estate. And so I will frame for you all what my team was brought in to do. I will also explain to you all where the city was before my team got here. Then we'll dive a little bit into specific goals, our tech and data journey, some next steps that my team will be tasked with carrying out over the next few months, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I hope the 20 minutes works. I'm gonna put my phone up here so I can keep track of where we are. Okay, but first a little bit about myself, about my team. We are somewhat of a unique model. This is the entire budget and innovation team within the mayor's office of LA Mayor Eric Garcetti. This is important because we're one of the few cities that has bundled the city's budget and the dollars that it manages and oversees with innovation. That umbrella, which to me really means modernizing systems, moving away from paper processes over to digital processes, having things that attach timestamps to when actions are taken. You know, it's not all highly convoluted or mysterious. A lot of it is just getting the city to a place where it can be efficient and where it can lead. So this model of bundling the dollars with the innovation work is very important. This is not all of my team. My team is the operations innovation team. We're a very nimble, fast, 4 to 6 person team. This is me right here. I'm a data strategist by day. Apparently by night I'm a babysitter as well. This day is when the employees can bring in their families to take pictures with the mayor. Let's see where we do the pointer. Well, the mayor's right there in the middle, so that was my boss's kid. She was busy with a meeting, and so I got stuck with baby duty. Card is very cool. But so all this to say, my team is structured in a very unique way. As the data strategist, I am tasked with threading together storytelling and data analysis. So that's important because most folks within the city are not technical, and most folks within the city have about 10 minutes to hear you out and decide if they're going to support your work or not. That's specifically important when it comes to policymakers. I will hint at LA's organizational structure in a little bit when we talk about the technology that we're rolling out. We have 3 project managers, each tasked with leading one very specific initiative: real estate, which is what we'll talk about today, procurement, which is the practice of buying products and services, and then the other one is employee safety and wellness. I work across all 3 of those initiatives, and again, merge storytelling and data analysis to drive forward our reform. Ooh, okay. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to formatting. I did this last night really late. That's bugging me out, that N is dangling, so I apologize for that. But real quick, what were we brought in to do within real estate? Our vision is to create a culture of real estate excellence and innovation through leadership. Specifically by capitalizing on intellectual capital. So who within the city can we leverage, and how does leadership transition or translate to innovation? One important note here, I know we can talk about specifically what technologies or systems we want to implement. Again, within a large bureaucracy, a tiny percentage of people will be tech curious or tech skilled. So having something that really bundles together the work in a more meta way, we find is increasingly important to continue getting buy-in. So before my team got here, or got to the mayor's office, where was the city at? That was back in September 2015. My team started in August 2015. Our first month was largely around kind of figuring out what we were doing. Most of us are not from government. Most of us came from the private sector. So the first month was really just learning. In September 2015, the city was, all real estate decisions were largely driven by the city council. LA City Council has 15 members. So imagine if operations are being driven by political figures. That meant that decisions were highly decentralized. They were not done strategically or with a very thoughtful intent. And so that was one big problem. Additionally, the process was really long. If a council member needed a list of the city-owned properties in their district, it took like 7 months to get a PDF of a CSV with like 10 records. 6 months. That's ridiculous. As I mentioned before, also lack of strategic leadership. When it comes to data work, operations, strategy, and a vision becomes really important. So from a technical perspective, how did that manifest itself? Well, we learned that there are at least 15 ad hoc local systems or processes. That's a fancy way of saying there are 15 different people having Excel files or Google Docs open on their computers, and they just did their own thing. That was mind-boggling to me because my friends and I use Google Docs to plan road trips. 5 people going to the mountains should not be the same way that the second largest city in the country manages its real estate. That's crazy. Additionally, like I mentioned, lists. That's how the city viewed its land. Rows and columns, tables. This is geography. We're talking about where people live, where they work, where community engagement happens. That should mean maps. That should mean let's view real estate not just as an address, and we didn't even have unique identifiers, by the way, so a lot of things were intersections or nicknames or properties. Let's view that within the context of its community. Additionally, there are no hierarchies, no standards. One group would call one property something, the other something else. Many times people thought they were talking about the same exact property, and they were talking about different things, or they thought they were talking about different properties, and it turned out to be the very same thing. So a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of poorly made decisions, a lot of context that wasn't there. So what were our goals when we started? We wanted to leverage technology in the best way possible. That meant moving away from rows and columns over to interactive maps. It meant having standards. It meant approaching our work in a way that creates transparency, and I'll show you what that really looks like now, a year and a half later. And really providing city infrastructure with the tools to approach its land strategically. It's, like I mentioned, affordable housing, homelessness, earthquakes, all very real things that could happen and are happening right now. How do you make decisions in a way that's strategic and is forward-thinking as opposed to highly reactive? So we're going to dive a little bit specifically into how we use technology and data to implement those goals. This kind of captures it. It's infrastructure, it's centralizing our data away from those 15 different systems, and also bringing in the right type of leadership. Along the way, you'll note some of the URLs. These will hint at either the open data portals that we leveraged or the different platforms and tools that we're implementing to provide both the data support, the tech side of things, and then lastly, some of the narrative. I'm sure storytelling, again, that's one of my roles. That's an increasingly important part of data work. As tech gets more complex, what are the stories, the anecdotes that together really highlight all of the important stuff? So because we had all of these random data sets and systems and spreadsheets, it was really tough to figure out where to start. So the most comprehensive listing that we found to use as our baseline was LA County's the county assessor office. So they had, for the most part, almost every asset that the city owned. It was largely outdated. And when we started, that was one of the biggest pieces of pushback. People knew that the county assessor's office was where the most amount of information was, but because it hadn't been updated recently, they were just like, well, it's bad. I thought, hey, you know what would be better? We don't have anything, so let's start with that and work on updating it and layering the new information that we have. So that's what we use. This runs off Socrata. If anybody has used it, anybody use Socrata or open data portals? Cool, a handful. This is amazing technology. It's super useful. There's thousands of municipalities, townships, cities, counties, states using Socrata technology to share stories, provide data sets. It has APIs. It has all kinds of downloads and things. You can bring real-time feeds into other platforms. I highly suggest you check it out. For LA County, that's data.lacounty.gov. So we use the county assessor to set a baseline. Now I mentioned 15 different systems that ultimately turn into 55 different data sets that we layered over the county assessor's database. We'll talk about polygons in a minute, but basically the county assessor gave us APNs, assessor parcel numbers. It was the closest thing to a unique identifier that only worked for properties within LA County, clearly because it is the LA County assessor's office. So we used them as a baseline and we started just mapping, geocoding all of those 55 different sets and layered them on top of each other. When we found an address that landed exactly on top of one of our APNs, we knew that that was a record that needed to be merged. We also set a little bit of a buffer around our parcels or the polygons that we got from the county assessor's office. If the address that we geocoded from one of the 55 data sets landed within, I think it was like a 10-foot buffer of the center of the polygon, we merged that as well. So we went 55 different data sets that resulted in about 27,000 records. After removing the first wave of duplicates, we went down to about 17,000. And then we realized we had made some mistakes, and so that took us down to about 13,000. We're not at a point where I feel pretty comfortable saying the city of Los Angeles owns about 10,000 parcels within the state of California. We own about 8,000 to 9,000 within LA County, but the city owns land in all kinds of places. So that was kind of the process that we went to set a baseline, to start being able to view things on a map. And then as we did some of the data work, we realized that we had a lot of bandwidth and knowledge gaps. So I'm not a trained computer scientist, I'm not a trained data scientist, I'm not a trained engineer. Most of what I've learned has come from project-oriented work. My background started in communication, so super soft skills. So knowing that we needed some support, also because it was a small, nimble team, we talked and contracted with a number of folks. Actual, like really badass professionals in the field. Compiler LA is a super small data firm in Los Angeles, run by folks that are extremely civically engaged through the Hack for LA network. And we worked with them to carry out the API work that we needed to do to pull polygons and different records, and they helped us with some of the initial mapping. That's us in one of our initial brainstorming sessions. That is not usually what government offices look like. Huge whiteboards, people hanging out in jeans and t-shirts and having coffee and laughing. That's not the usual environment that government operates in. So for this type of work to be successful, I encourage you all, if you do work within large bureaucracies, corporations, academia, government, take people out of their environment and put them in the more open, creative space. That's something we've learned really works to help our work stay sustainable. It gets them on your team and gets them excited. If you are on Twitter, @Chanel she's my team's director, incredible human being, super smart, very driven. I encourage you to follow her. Some other folks that we worked with to help carry out this work. Bloomberg Philanthropies, it's an effort out of former New York Mayor Bloomberg. What they do is they basically deploy innovation teams to different cities across the country, and internationally they have a team in Jerusalem, and they tackle super specific business problems. Very specific, they carry that out. They have a trained data scientist at I Got Charts. This dude loves data so much, he just makes visualizations in his free time, and so I Got Charts is his blog. I encourage you to follow him, Alex Pudlin. He's been an incredible resource for me, not being a trained data scientist. We also leverage the mayor's data team. Lillian Corral is our LA's chief data officer. I believe one of the few Latinas that holds that title. She runs an incredible, agile, and highly skilled team at El Corral. Also our city controller, Juan Lopez, he runs tech and innovation for the city controller. We use their open data portals and some of their mapping resources. A few other folks, the Department of General Services, LA County GIS, General Assembly, which is an alternative education course. All this to say, this type of work, it's impossible for one person to do it. It's impossible for one team, one small team to do it. You need engagement at all levels. You need buy-in at all levels. You need support and knowledge and resources from across sectors. One note on General Assembly, because I'm not a trained data scientist or even really a true computer practitioner, I would encourage you all to check out General Assembly. They offer courses, nights and weekends, full and part-time for those trying to grow their skill set, to transition into more technical careers. They've been incredible, just way to get more comfortable with this type of subject matter. And so I can step into rooms and at least pretend like I'm not talking about long enough for people to do the thing I need to. So what do we do once we finish layering and mapping and merging and we knew this was the data set that represented LA's real estate portfolio? Well, government has this thing where they either want to go enterprise-wide and institute multi-million-dollar systems off the bat, or they want to build their own solutions, which, as you know, that can be increasingly difficult to maintain. If you lose the person that built it, that configured it, it can be super costly. It also makes it really tough for that technology to stay up to date with industry trends. So we went with eProperty Plus. It's an off-the-shelf solution. Number of municipalities use it, mostly to dispose of land. We were the first city to use it to manage and really to impact operations. There's a team of us that are pushing the city towards open source. We know there are open source tools that could help with this. Again, maintenance becomes a really big issue, which is why I encourage cities and governments to marry third-party solutions and open source efforts so that they can contribute to their civic tech community. Open source, it's growing in importance for governments, and so we've tried to prioritize that. So I talked about tables and lists. This is what the back end of the system now looks like. So instead of making decisions off a PDF saved out from a list, we have polygons. Does anybody any geospatial folks using polygons in your work? Handful of people? Excellent. This is super important because if a city council member asks us, hey, I need a place to put affordable housing units, maybe if it's a long strip, that's not going to work. If it's a circle or if it's all kinds of funkiness, that's going to increase cost dramatically. Through polygons, we get a sense of the actual shape of the real estate asset. It also allows for just better decision making. So that's one key thing. Also, I'll point out, we now have standards, and we have parcel numbers or de facto unique identifier. We use that structure because it's the closest thing we have. From the research we've done, there is no perfect unique identifier for real estate. So LA County assessor parcel numbers are 10 characters. That's just what we're using. If sometimes there's some funkiness where you have multiple structures on top of one parcel, we just add a 3-digit extension to that, but now we have a unique identifier. We also have hierarchies and standards. We have a sense of who manages what. I'll talk a little bit about city hierarchy and infrastructure in a little bit, but this, just moving people away from lists to maps, has created an incredible amount of efficiencies and time. But one of the things that has really resonated with me in the work that we've been doing is that people within the city were looking at real estate in a vacuum. They were saying, what do we own and where? And okay, here's a lot in the area that I needed, so I'm just going to go with that. And to me, that felt irresponsible because real estate exists within the context of a community, and so being fully aware of what's around the community became super important. geohub.lacity.org, this runs up Esri technology. This is, I highly encourage you all to check this out. If you all have worked with any of your local governments, incredible tool. And what it does is it allows us to host a number of shape files and public data sets that are out there for public consumption. You can download them as shape files, as JSON files. They have API integrations, and it ranges from where are the parks to where are the libraries to seismic information. So I spent a day going through the hundreds of data sets that the city published to its GeoHub. In this example, mental health centers. Well, homelessness is a really big problem in Los Angeles. We're the homeless capital of the nation, the world in some narratives. If we're talking about finding a site where we can build transitional or permanent housing for a homeless community, does the proximity to mental health centers and homelessness centers, should that not be part of the discussion? Would you not rather put a site for folks struggling with homelessness across the street from a service provider or from a mental health center, as opposed to 3 miles away? These things matter. That's where the context that we're trying to bring in. So on the left side, what you're seeing is the shapefile from the GeoHub, and then on the right side, this is the back end of eProperty Plus that the city folks have access to. And these are all of the 25 community layers that we brought in. So here we're seeing a number of properties in relation to the homeless shelters and services that are by them, and then also the mental health centers. Just one anecdote or way that we're using this. I've also learned, by the way, if anybody's interested, it seems like the ideal size for transitional housing for homelessness is 5,000 to 25,000 square feet. So things we're learning. I know we're coming up on the 20-minute mark, so I'll start wrapping up. This is what most of the city infrastructure looks like. As we're rolling out the systems, these are all of the people that I'm training on a regular basis on how to use the system. Notice that the circles kind of congregate up top. It's very important to have buy-in from the elected officials. So I'm sitting down with them, doing active trainings on how to use the system. I built a miniature video library using Jing, which is a screencast type software that I can just record my clicks and it'll record my voice. So that's something we make available to the different departments and council offices we train them. There's a public portal component that comes with this. Having access and transparency is really important. That's what it looks like. It will be live at data.lacity.org/property. It's not yet live. It offers the public some back-end type search functionality like the back-end does. Here's one example of that. It's identifying properties in Council District 14. That's where I live. Narrative and storytelling is super important. It's why I'm wearing my I Am an Immigrant t-shirt, and why I do it anytime I have a speaking engagement, because I am an immigrant, I'm from Colombia originally, and telling my story is just as important as telling LA's story. And so we use the GeoHub to build a story map, which basically provides storytelling and analysis. This is one way we're creating buy-in for our system. And what are we going to do next? We're going to keep training people. We're going to fully release the public portal so that everybody can engage and help us clean data. We will continue to standardize, we'll continue to validate, we'll continue to expand the data collected, and most importantly, we're analyzing the talent pipeline, because right now we know we lack the technical skill set to keep growing this type of work. So these are some of the things that we'll be doing. I think that gets us to, man, that formatting is driving me crazy. That's it. Thank you all for your ears and your attention. I hope this is valuable. We have some minutes for Q&A. Any questions or thoughts? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. What other data can this provide? Like, yours obviously shows like visualize the real estate of a particular area. Like, for example, you were showing the mental counseling center. Mm-hmm. Can you also? Is it also possible to show like how much the property will cost if you want to actually build it, or also what the operating hours and all that?
Yeah, it would.
It's kind of like Google Maps merged with the systems you developed.
Yeah, it reflects also the funding source, which is really important in deciding if a city has a property because of a particular grant or pot of money. If we dispose of it, sometimes those grants have implication as to where the money goes back to. It also provides information on square footage for a structure. We're transitioning to a more permanent asset management system. We'll speak to like lease information and financial projections. So some examples. Does that answer your question?
Almost. Can it also tell you where you can find good parking as well? Because obviously on Google Maps, obviously you have to drive a certain distance to get to a particular parking garage. This is practically real estate visualization.
Yeah, it'll create a radius around specific assets so I can look for things. As far as parking goes, no, that's a problem in LA we're all trying to fix, and the system doesn't do that. We're getting there though. A lot of folks are using APIs and open data portals to tackle that. Yes?
Is there another city that's already doing this well that you're looking to for insights and advice?
New York City, they have the New York Economic Development. They have transitioned real estate operations outside of government. So they use government input to drive the real estate decisions, but they have actual real estate experts doing that. We've also consulted with organizations like a few universities in the area that use the systems. Detroit, who had an incredible and still has a very difficult real estate situation, but New York is definitely the best model so far we've seen.
Well,
yeah.
A question for you guys.
Okay.
I'm pursuing a master's in business analytics. Now, one question I would like to ask is, from the point of making all this big data a sustainable thing in the future, you yourself mentioned it's a big problem of homelessness in Los Angeles. So the data that you get about the growth in homelessness, whom are you feeding the data so you can address that problem? Because that has to be solved finally, because you need people to buy things rather than just living on doles, right?
Yeah.
So
Right now, I am the point of contact for a lot of the teams within the city infrastructure that are tackling the problem. So they will literally come to my office, we'll sit down, we'll talk about their needs, and we'll find properties. As we roll this out, we will be creating that type of pathway for dialogue with community organizations so they can sit down and use the public portal to make those decisions. One way we're actively doing this also is we identify like 15 properties that can be quickly disposed of to generate the revenue needed to fund some of the homelessness efforts.
I was wondering if there's a chance to test the data, like how accurate is your data out in your scheme or something?
Because there's no, so we know we have the cleanest data of any data set. How it compares to the 100% truth, we don't really know that. We just don't know. So we're slowly working our way to where we can make some better kind of understanding of where our gaps are, but we know we have the most complete data. The margin of error, we don't know yet. Yes. Ma'am, in the back. Data.lacity.org and GeoHub are not open source. They do publish a lot of stuff to GitHub, but they're not open source. But they are publicly available, meaning you can extract all that data, you can create real-time feeds. So as a student, I would highly encourage you to go and get comfortable with open data portals. Again, they run on Socrata and Esri technology, which is not open source. I have not seen, I've seen cities do data validation through GitHub, meaning publishing their data sets and allowing the community to put in requests and then they will commit the changes. But that's as far as it goes, as far as I've seen. Yes, sir?
What kind of back-end infrastructure is it around? Like, how much space and space? It's all on-prem or?
It's all hosted by the vendor, so it doesn't eat up any out of our server space, and there were some requirements, but it's pretty light. And the permanent system that we're moving on to that will also be hosted by the vendor. The city as a whole is moving towards Amazon Web Services or go-to hosting service, but this is really light.
How much data are you talking?
Memory-wise, I don't know. I know it houses probably like 15 tables with around 12,000 records, and then there's around 150 megs of shape files. I saw a few other hands. Anybody? 1 minute, last question?
Where do you feed the shape files?
What the what?
Where do you feed the shape files?
And they go from the GeoHub into the back end of eProperty Plus and into the front-facing portal. And right now that was an export of a shapefile and then imported. The next iteration will be a direct API feed so that as things change in the shapefile, they're reflected in the system. Cool. I think that's our time. Thank you all. I'll be hanging out, so if you have any additional questions, also at Juan Vasquez on Twitter. I respond. I appreciate your time. Thank you.